Okay, so here we are in Carrara's render room, and this is still the first render that I made. I realized that there was a couple things that I forgot to talk about, and I want to address them now. And I also realized how terrible the microphone I'm using is. This is all I have to work with tonight, guys, so please find it in your hearts to forgive me. One thing that I wanted to bring up was the texture map that I used for the eyes, and this is very important in that this particular map does not have highlights painted onto it. This is a big problem you're going to find in Poser. Because Poser has such a wimpy rendering engine, most merchants will actually paint the highlights and the reflections onto the eyes themselves. And this is bad in Carrara because we actually have the power to get good reflections and good highlights. And after much searching, I found that a merchant over at Renderosity by the name of Rebel Mommy has an excellent merchant resource kit that has plenty of great looking eye maps with no reflections painted onto them, and it would definitely be a good thing for you to go out and pick that item up. And the other thing that I forgot to talk about really is my render settings. Pretty stupid, huh? But like I said, I'm new at this. Basically, not much going on here in the under the general render settings. I've got the anti-aliasing, object accuracy, shadow accuracy. That's a tongue twister. Set to their second best levels. And the filter sharpness and maximum ray depth are both maxed out. Maximum ray depth is important if you're using transmapped hair. You're going to get some artifacts in there if you don't have it set high enough, and it really doesn't impact your rendering time too much. Skylight I have set to 165%. This is going to vary depending on whether or not you're using ambient scene light or lots of lights in your scene, and the actual brightness of your HDRI map or the sky settings that you're using. Precision I have set to 45%. This is basically a balance between what Carrara guesses at and what it actually calculates. The higher the precision is set, the longer it's going to take to render, but the better it's going to look. And this does fall under the interpolation category, and to interpolate basically just means to guess. And a little trick to keep in mind, setting precision to 100% will give you better results than turning off interpolation. I know, it gives me a headache too, but it works. Obviously, light through transparency needs to be set because we have transmapped eyes and hair and eyelashes and whatnot. Photon count, I usually keep pretty mild unless I need it to be higher because there's no walls or anything for the light to bounce around in this scene. 15,000 seems to be a good number. I usually don't go more than 20, maybe 25,000. Photon map accuracy, again, the higher you set it, the better your render is going to look and the longer it's going to take. If you notice that you're getting a lot of artifacting in your render and nasty looking shadows and whatnot, photon map accuracy is usually the culprit, and you're going to want to try cranking it up maybe about 5% at a time until you get what you're looking for. Overall lighting quality I set to excellent. Obviously, had I set it to best, it would have taken a lot longer. At excellent, this render only took 4 minutes and 12 seconds, so you can't really beat that. Now for the output, I set it to Photoshop, and this is important because when you save your image after you render it, you're going to want it in some kind of lossless format. If you use a JPEG, for example, Carrara is going to compress the image, and you could get a quality loss in there. And you don't want that to happen until you get into Photoshop or whatever image editor you're going to use to touch this up at. And then finally, and this is one of the most overlooked settings in Carrara's rendering settings, is the tile size. Now when you render your image, you'll see that you'll have a couple of tiles, depending on your processor, zipping across the screen rendering your image. And this number basically represents the overall size of the tiles. Now Carrara defaults at 128 pixels, but I actually decreased it down to 32 pixels. And this will speed up the render if you have lots of transmapped hair in the scene, because any kind of transparency is obviously going to slow down the rendering engine. And if you use a big tile size, it'll have a tendency to kind of get stuck over a transparent area. Going with a smaller tile allows Carrara's renderer to finish that area quickly and move on to the next area that needs to be rendered. So it's something neat to keep in mind, especially on close-ups. Decreasing the tile size will save you a lot of rendering time. And that's really all I want to talk about here. I got one more render to show you, and then I'm going to stop this and watch the Pacific because it's driving me crazy that I haven't watched it yet tonight. Be right back. Okay, so I'm back right now, and I want to show you one more render that I made in the same scene but with some different settings. This is the first render that I made using global illumination. Like I said, it took about a little over 4 minutes. And then this guy here, or girl I should say, was made using full indirect lighting, and it took about 6 or 7 minutes. And really, there's not much of a difference between the two. Without indirect lighting, with indirect lighting. I know you can't really tell because of this capture software and the resolution. There is a subtle difference, and it's really up to you to decide what looks better. Now, in a scene like this, let me go back to Carrara here. There's because there's not much going on in terms of walls and whatnot. Indirect lighting is a nice subtle effect, but it's not really overly necessary. If you're doing an interior scene with lots of walls, then it is a must-use option. And you can see over here that I've got skylight set to 50%, IDL set to 400%. And that's pretty much the only difference in the rendering settings. In the scene settings, you're basically going to want to kill your ambient light if you're using indirect light because you don't need it. Like I said earlier in this tutorial, the only reason why I was using ambient light is because I was not using indirect lighting and I wanted some kind of fill light for my scene. And that's really all there is to it. Now, if, as I said earlier, different scenes are definitely going to require different rendering settings. And, you know, if this was a scene where I had more walls and whatnot, it would be much more complicated and take a lot longer to render. And this is an important tip that I learned along the way, is to treat your 3D scenes like a movie set. In other words, if you can't see it in your production frame here, then it doesn't need to be there. For example, if this was an interior scene, I wouldn't need to have walls on either side of her if you're not going to see them in the first place. I know it's cheating, but hey, that's how it's done. If you go to a sound stage at a movie production, any set that they have built is going to have removable walls and a removable ceiling, and any area that you don't see outside of the camera's frame, called off-screen space, is going to be filled with diffuse panels and spotlights and maybe even the camera and wind machines and smoke machines and whatnot. So basically what I'm trying to say is, do what you have to do to get good lighting, and don't worry about whether or not it's believable or not. In this scene, I just wanted my girl to look good. I don't really care if it's realistic or not. I wanted the textures to pop. I wanted her eyes to look great. And, you know, I think I kind of sort of achieved that with my meager skills here. Now, I'm currently looking for ideas for more tutorials. I'm going to probably record a couple more with a better microphone, kind of showcasing some more complex and more difficult to produce lighting sequences. But for now, if you're doing pinup artwork and whatnot, I hope that what I talked about here tonight can help you out a little bit. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for their wonderful support over at Renderosity. It means a lot to me, all your gallery comments and everything. You know, kind of inflates my ego, but hey, that's alright. So at any rate, like I said, my name is Jim T-Shirt. You can find me at Renderosity under the name of JT401, and drop me a message. Let me know if this tutorial helped you out, or if I'm just, you know, hearing myself talk all night. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll talk to you later.